Yo, this is Steve Bloom, and you're watching Moana Nui Podcast. We'll be starting soon. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Veronica Taylor, and from myself and Ash Ketchum, I just want to say, Moana Nui, I choose you!
Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our 8:30 episode of the Moana Nui Podcast. We're so glad to have you part of our episode today. For those who are joining us for the first time, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Dana. I am an event planner, a cosplay, con staff, and event photographer. I'm also a voice actor and a whole lot more behind the scenes. And also, we have to introduce the other half of the Moana Nui podcast, the yin to my yang, and also the Renaissance woman of our time, the very lovely and the beautiful Moana.
Aloha, everybody. Welcome to tonight's show. As Dana mentioned, my name's Moana. I, first and foremost, am a advocate for Pacific Islanders in our AAPI community, and even more broadly towards our BIPOC community, uplifting voices in marginalized spaces and creating safe places for us to voice our concerns, voice our challenges, our victories, all of those things. I am also a children's book author for the Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea series and an editor and publisher for the Wildcard Chronicles here at Burning Spear Comics. I am really excited to be here tonight and to have Sue-Ann back with us and a new wonderful group of panelists. Tonight, we are going to be talking about individual development and how you can better position and advocate for yourself at work and in life. And so I'm really excited to hear the perspectives of our panelists tonight. But before we do that, we will introduce Sue-Ann, who is the CEO of CAPAW. She has definitely been a mentor to me, both directly and indirectly. And we're excited, honored to have her as a partner here on the show. So let's bring Sue-Ann on.
Hello, Sue-Ann.
Hello, everybody. Moana Nui, how are you?
Doing well.
Yes.
It's good to see you.
So excited for tonight's conversation, and we have a powerhouse of amazing individuals that I can't wait to talk with. So, Dana, I would love it if you would go ahead and introduce our guests.
Well, our first guest, Lovely, is the CEO of Joe. Now, I hope I'm not mispronouncing Joe DV Consulting, a consulting firm partnering with philanthropies, nonprofits, and businesses globally to create positive social change. Clients have included the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation, the Four Freedoms Fund, Public Wise, National Immigration Law Center, and more. She has been practicing law for 18 years prior to moving to philanthropy and consulting. And as a lawyer, Lovely was the executive director of the Law School Consortium Project, a national social entrepreneurial organization that increased the affordability and accessibility of legal services to underrepresented communities. And she's also a co-author of a couple different books, and she volunteers as a board member of New Ways pathways. So let us welcome Lovely to the podcast. Welcome to you.
Aloha, welcome.
Aloha. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And our next panelist, Jerry, is a trusted advisor and purpose oriented leader with over 20 years of success guiding transformational initiatives for national leading organizations. She is an tongue tie. She is an influential cross-functional change agent, now known for building top-performing teams and pioneering solutions that drive organizational health, profitability, and sustainability. Prior to she practiced law at law firms where she practiced focus on private equity and corporate transactions. But she is the chairwoman of ADP's Women in Leadership and Organization for Senior and Executive Women Leaders at ADP, and is part of the Conference Board Leadership Council on Advancing Women. And in addition, she also sits on steering committee of Cultivate, which is ADP's African American Business Resource Group, and is an active member of ADP's Pride, LGBTQ, and Ally Business Resource Group, and a whole lot more. You'll come to know these women do not do just one thing. So I'd like to welcome Jerry to the podcast. Welcome to you. Thank you so much for being part of the show tonight. And last but certainly not least, another powerhouse that we have on the show. After 4 years in the chemical industry, Donna Fuyomoto Cole founded Cole Chemical in 1980 at the age of 27, divorced with a 4-year-old daughter with $5,000 from her savings at the encouragement of chemical buyers at Exxon, Shell, Monsanto, and DuPont to start a certified minority and woman-owned business to help them meet their government purchasing goals. And she not only hires minority and women, she pioneers the second tier reporting of their own purchases to her customers in 1982. And after 42 years of that she started, sold, and invested in so many businesses over the years. She also have relationships with Fortune 500 global companies on supply and consumer side of businesses, while receiving quality services and awards for all the things that she does. She served on many national and governmental boards, and the list goes on of what she's even the co-founder of the Pantheon of Women, a production company telling great stories about strong women and supportive men in film, television, plays, and musicals to change the way men treat and perceive women and how women see themselves. So let us also welcome another juggernaut to the show, Miss Donna Cole. Welcome, Miss Cole.
I'm raising the roof right now.
I know. I was like, just these bios. I was like, I'm trying to sum up everything y'all doing. It's like, it is not enough. Y'all all need a whole like rolling screen of just all the stuff y'all doing, because
absolutely,
definitely, exactly, totally bow down. And we're going to go ahead and hand over the floor to Sue Ann to start this conversation on individual development. Thank you so much, ladies, for being part of today's show.
Thank you so much, Moana and Dana. Just always a pleasure to spend time with you and the Moana Nui audience. First of all, this topic tonight of individual development, I am very, very passionate about, because ultimately it is your responsibility for your own development, right? So we've got to make sure that what are we doing? What are those key things that, if there's certain things you want to achieve, what are you doing about that development for yourself? So I have 3 incredible women, and I'm just going to start the conversation with just kind of getting their backgrounds in their own words So Donna, can you share your background with the group and also your heritage as well? Oh, I think you're on mute. No.
That better?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You got it. You got it.
Great. All right. Sorry. Thank you. Good evening. So I'm Japanese American. I'm third generation. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and my family moved to South Texas. So that's where I grew up. And I was bullied in elementary school to the point where I would hide underneath the teacher's desk at recess so I wouldn't have to go out and be bullied anymore. But, you know, my saving grace was show and tell. So I got to take my dad's 442 Army book to school and show that he was in the U.S. Army and he was an American citizen, and so am I. So, you know, after all of that, I realized later in life that I could have grown up mean and angry and resentful. And instead, I took the other side of the coin and said, you know what? I want people to like me, right? I'm an okay kid. So I found myself joining all of these organizations in junior high and high school. So I was ADHD organizations, Latin club, band. I was a twirler. I was in the art club. I was the Future Homemakers of America. So, and Girl Scouts, and doing a lot of volunteering wherever I could. So that's me prior to Coal Chemical.
Oh my gosh, Donna, you still do those things probably today. You have like 6, 7, 8 things you're doing all the time. So that kind of, you know, was a trajectory to your adulthood, I feel like. So yeah, we're going to explore some more of that in your background. But Lovely, how about you? What is your background and your heritage?
So I'm South Asian. My family, my parents were both born and their ancestral homelands were in what's now Pakistan. But when India was divided, they had to move over to India as refugees. And I was born in India and came to the U.S. when I was 5 and was raised in Tallahassee, Florida. And like you, Donna, there weren't a lot of other people that looked or sounded like me. In fact, I was very much in a black and white world. The challenge was that I was never fully accepted by either community. But the beauty of it was that I was somewhat accepted. And sometimes it was just because they didn't know what to make of me. And they're like, well, we know you're not the other. So and there were some really special things about being in the South, other things that were, that were things that I had to learn to deal with. My father taught at an HBCU, so I feel very close to that culture. He also researched and wrote on poverty and rural community development, which informed why I wanted to go to law school, because I saw that difference that race and class make in our country. And I've done all sorts of fun things, but one of the things that, in just really honoring Moana Nui, is after law school, I started my entire professional career in Hawaii. So, I especially was happy to be both invited and to agree to this. So I'm a proud South Asian. I love my heritage, and I really respect BIPOC communities and my API sisters and BIPOC sisters and brothers, but especially us girls.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And by the way, my mom was retired at a HBCU as well. So I have a very special connection to HBCUs. Yes, hearts.
That's awesome.
All right, Jerry, tell us about your background and your heritage.
Sure, thank you. So I am Jerry Guino. I'm African American. My father was born and grew up in Kenya, and my mother grew up in the South. And he came over in a time when there was still a lot of racial turmoil in the United States. And so I think some of that, those challenges in terms of the racism that he faced going to school in the South, he was able to actually sit up front, whereas people who were from the South actually couldn't sit in the theater. So it's an interesting dynamic in which he came to the U.S. And when we I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is a town that isn't super diverse. And I tended to be one of the only Blacks in my school, African Americans in my school. And that kind of continued on as I went into my different professions. And so I really do have a passion for supporting people of diverse backgrounds to remove what I call internal and external barriers. I think there are certainly internal barriers that we create for ourselves, but there's also institutional barriers that are created that inhibit us from really reaching our full potential. And so I'm delighted to be here today. By the way, Sue Ann, when you reached out to me, I happened to be in Maui enjoying some vacation. So when I saw that this is, for Moana Nui, I was like, this is fantastic. This is a good fit in terms of what's happening right now. So.
Thank you so much. And that you said something that really resonates for me personally, is that being the only or one of the few and like, how do you maneuver? How do you adjust in that being that one of the handful or one of the only? I think we're going to get into a little bit of that. So, now let's talk a little bit about careers. So Lovely, tell us a little bit about your career path, because you've had multiple shifts in your career. I'm curious about your journey.
Yeah. Sue Ann and everybody else, I have always been so focused, as I mentioned, based on my experience as a child and my mother's, underlying principles of equity and service. Those were sort of the two underlying principles and values that she raised us with. I've always been interested in social justice. It's why I went to law school. It's what I wanted to do with my career. And I was very lucky to have an amazing career that always allowed me to do that. And as we talk about individual development, because that was a goal of mine, I learned early on to recognize the business side of what that meant. So I was very careful about managing what I spent, because if I wanted to focus in on social justice, then that meant I had to think about what kind of compromises I might have to make to have a career in social justice. Now, thank goodness that's changed over time. And I always negotiated very, very hard for good salaries, because I don't think you have to be poor to do good work. But my focus initially after law school was working with a critical race theorist in Hawaii, Mari Matsuda. And then I worked at a global law firm, doing a lot of pro bono work, mostly in immigration. And then I led the California Minority Council program, which was working with fantastic people like Jerry, who are so dedicated to BIPOC issues and empowering BIPOC professionals. And that organization worked with those general counsel, assistant general counsel people in creating equity in the practice of law. And then I was a prosecutor in the San Francisco DA's office, where I prosecuted hate crimes and domestic violence. And I actually overlapped and became friends and remained friends with Kamala Harris, another powerful woman for our communities. And then I went on, and we'll talk about all these shifts later on and sort of some of how that relates to individual development. And then I led this national nonprofit that Dina so politely and thoughtfully articulated at the beginning, that was focusing on creating equity in accessing legal services, especially for low and middle income communities. And then I moved into philanthropy, and I worked at the Gates Foundation. I managed a $90 million portfolio, leading advocacy and policy for their work as deputy director of strategy, management, and evaluation in all of their advocacy and policy work in the United States. And as evaluation became, fell under my division, I was very interested in the way in which we use data in order to show impact. And that's when I moved into consulting, because I went to an amazing evaluation firm where I really developed deep rigor around that. And then as my parents were aging, as women often do, I really wanted to be there for them, especially I think many women of color focus in on how we support our families and our communities on all levels. And so I moved back to Atlanta, where my parents are and my two sisters are. And now I'm here with them. And I started my own firm when I moved here, and do work with amazing clients. One of the clients I want to mention that I'm currently working with, have been working with for almost a year, is the Malala Fund. And they support women and girls issues in education. And it's very much about individual development as well.
I love that. So lovely. One of the things that I want to explore a little bit later is, even though you're shifting from, law, philanthropy, consulting, nonprofit, all these different spaces, there are certain things that I think, certain characteristics, leadership qualities that come over and cross over. So I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's important to call out. So Jerry, what about you? Can you share your career path?
Certainly. I'll start by saying that I pursued a degree, an undergrad degree in psychology and social welfare. And I was in a class for labor and the law, and it was very interesting to me, the concepts that were being floated in class. So I decided I was going to go and pursue a law degree. For me, I knew that in order to be successful to the extent that I wanted to be successful, that I needed to make sure I had as much in my background as possible so that I could remove any kind of considerations for people. So I actually went and pursued a joint JD MBA at NYU and worked in private practice for the first couple of years. So I went to a large New York law firm, as was shared in an introduction, doing private equity M&A, and did that for a few years, for about 4.5 years, and then decided that I wanted to try something different. But I still wanted to stay at the private practice of law. So I moved down to Atlanta. I got an opportunity with a different type of law firm, which was more focused on client acquisition as opposed to client retention, and expanded to do more corporate work at a firm called Greenberg Traurig. And then I was recruited to ADP. I got a call from a headhunter saying, I have this fantastic opportunity at this organization. Would you like to consider it? I said, thanks, but no thanks. And she called me back a few months later, said, you really should consider it. So I actually entertained the call, and I thought I would take this opportunity for 2 years, and more than 16 years later, I'm still with the company. I've really had an opportunity to do a lot of different things as I've been at ADP. I've served in 3 different roles. I've been promoted 4 different times while I've been at ADP. And because it stays interesting, and because I stay invested in delivering results and affecting change in the company, it's something that really is delightful. And I think one of the passions I have from a organizational perspective is all of the work that I'm able to do, what I consider kind of extracurricular outside of my day-to-day legal responsibilities. But I am, because I have a reputation at the company for affecting change, I was asked to stand up this organization recently called the Global Contracts Team. And so it really was forming an organization from the ground up. And it was one of the probably the biggest changes that we've done organizationally from a legal perspective at ADP in the 70 years that ADP has been in existence. So it's been a journey in the project, and it requires you to really be collaborative and get a lot of buy-in from folks that you don't have direct responsibility for.
Thank you for sharing that. And, I've worked with Jerry for, probably just under a year. We didn't know each other for that long. But one thing that I know about Jerry in working with her is just her authenticity and the way that she approaches people, which that's what it takes for that collaboration. So as you think about development, as you think about what it is that you want to really, what your brand, what is that brand for yourself? Think about that. And how do you do that and get that personal power from that authenticity? So I think that's an important piece that I wanted to also address. But before that, Donna Cole.
Yes.
Amazing, Donna Cole. Please tell us and share with the group about your entrepreneurship, so many projects you've got going, and just your journey.
Okay, great. So, I started Cole Chemical, as you know, as a very young woman, and had lots of challenges being young, being a woman, and then of course being Japanese American on top of it. But so we started out trading, buying and selling chemicals, and then very heavy into the oil and gas, drilling, refining, and chemical industry. And then of course the bottom fell out of the energy industry. So it was a matter of I needed to look elsewhere to get additional business. So we started doing more international business, and we started doing business with about 10 new industries, whether it was pulp and paper, personal care, the electric utility industry, electronics, aerospace. We really expanded a lot in that area. And then I had the opportunity to buy a company in Detroit. So we're into manufacturing now. And then started a antifreeze manufacturing company. And along the way, I was in and out of some other businesses. People would come to me and say, "Hey, can you partner with me and help me start this business?" And I would say, "Yeah, it looks pretty good and kind of in line with what we do." Right. So that was the antifreeze business. And then we had some other businesses where we were doing mold release agents for foundries. And we were also doing surface technologies, chemicals. So then along the way, I started doing a lot of volunteer work, right? And you're asked to support a lot of organizations. So you start, drifting off in these areas. And so I realized I couldn't mentor as many people as I wanted. So that's how I actually got into plays and musicals and producing film, was because I saw The Blind Side. And I thought, what a great movie. This woman had this supportive man who was allowing her to let this African-American child come into their home and be family. And I thought, if I could tell great stories, I could mentor millions to inspire them and motivate them, because I don't have the time to every day to mentor people and still run a chemical company, right? So that's kind of been my journey. And I think I realized too that it's a lot more fun helping others and connecting people. So I do that in business, but I also do that a lot in terms of community work.
So many things. You have such a vast portfolio. I'm curious, when you you go into spaces that you don't necessarily know, what are some examples of how did you prepare yourself to enter into an area that you weren't familiar with? What's the thought process? How do you do it?
Yeah. So, people want to help other people. And I think so many people are afraid to ask other people for help, or what do they know? Who could they introduce you to, and referrals. And so I was pretty good about that. I had an old boss who told me, if the phone doesn't ring, it's because you're not making sales calls. One. Secondly, go ask an expert about what they do, and you can take all that knowledge in and learn quickly about an industry or a process. And so that's actually what I did.
I hear two things. One is curiosity in terms of just being curious in general about different areas. But two is the learning agility. I think the ability to learn and learn quickly, you said, to be able to then make that connection and connecting the dots to be able to then move into the new space.
Sure. Find the right to work with too.
Absolutely. Lovely. What about you? What are some key ways that you developed yourself, and focus in order to then go into these different spaces that you've been in?
Yeah, that is, it's such a good question. And it's a question I think we should always ask ourselves for every stage of our life. I mean, one of the things that I did is I read so many books on women in business, because I was, even though I was in, corporate world initially, and then really deeply immersed in the social justice space. Whether you're in the DA's office or a big firm or even the Gates Foundation, you still have a lot of leadership that's of a certain style. And so it was really important for me to first, and my father was a sociologist. Like I said, my mother's this deeply personal woman who gave us all these values. My first part is really understanding the environment that I'm in. So like there's a really great book that's called Your First 90 Days. And I really enjoyed that, just some basic tips. I think that's good. Or I remember reading, this fantastic book years and years ago called Play Like a Man, Win Like a Woman. And I doubt it's relevant anymore, but I just really going in and thinking about, understanding the culture there, understanding who were the power players, asking people those questions so that I could really get a sense of what the environment was. And then because I did move into all of these different sectors, like, I never thought I would be a prosecutor. And in fact, I became one because my knee-jerk reaction would have been to be a public defender. But because we had a very, very progressive district attorney in San Francisco that wanted to bring in community-based lawyers who were very focused on equity, I had to literally be in court during the day and study criminal law and evidentiary law at night. I mean, I probably worked 18-hour days. But, again, if you strive to excellence and you strive to doing things that are different, you've got to have that good sense, again, kind of going to being practical to what is being in this environment going to require of me so I can have the best fulfilling experience and be successful however I define it.
So I love that, because let me go back, everybody. Understanding the lay of the land. Very important. The political landscape. How are decisions made and who's making it? And if you look at promotions and who are they aligned to, right? So understanding the lay of the land is very, very important. Jerry, what about you? Tell us a little bit about your path.
Sure. I love, I'm learning a lot on this call tonight. So thank you. But this concept of really going into an environment and learning and kind of just getting to know the players is critically important. I would say, as I stepped into different roles at ADP, frankly, my first role, leader role, I went from an individual contributor to leading a team of 30, which was one of the largest groups within the legal function. And I think the reason that the organization felt confidence in me was because of how I showed up in what I was doing. And so they took a chance on me, frankly. And I've recently saw a colleague of mine who was a lawyer who went into the business side, and they're taking a chance on her as well. But when you deliver results and you advocate for yourself, I remember going to my manager at the time saying, I like what I'm doing, but here's some other things that I think will help me to round out my skill set, and she's like, wow, that's great. Like, it's very advocating for yourself, being proactive, identifying the areas that you want to learn and grow. And like Donna said, people are willing to support and help you both with inside of your organizations and outside of your organizations. So as I look to continue to expand my skill sets, I often look at, are there industry groups that I can join to get to know, this area more. I think that's also really important, is to just express what it is that you're seeking to achieve. And you'd be amazed at the people who would be willing to support you when you vocalize what it is that you're trying to do. I had wanted to get more involved in some of the local communities here in Atlanta. And so just even expressing my desire to join a not-for-profit board, pretty quickly connections were being made, with some of the folks that I know well. And I ended up joining Dress for Success Atlanta earlier this year. And I'm delighted to be able to support such a wonderful organization. So those are some of the things I think in terms of, stepping into areas that may be new, and being willing to take risk and express what you need and what you want.
So Jerry, I love the fact that you had a specific area that you wanted to grow, and the fact that that was communicated, and in conjunction with your supervisor, you're basically saying, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do. I was curious, Jerry, if you if there was a particular learning throughout your career, like, are there some key learnings when you're, whether it's tackling new new projects or going to a new area. Can you share like a key learning that you've had in your career?
Sure, I've had lots of key learnings in my career, but I would say one of the things is just be willing to step out and take a chance on yourself. I would say that sometimes we overthink things, we overanalyze things, particularly as attorneys. We're a bit risk averse. I try to stylize myself as a business person with a legal background, and I always encourage members of my team to lean into the yes. Right? It's like you need to be willing to open up your aperture to what's out there and what's available, and we actually have a reputation for being innovative. We created an innovative product that came from the legal organization, which people thought, wow, the lawyers are doing product development. This is interesting. But it's really because of this mindset of lead with yes, be open to the possibilities, and be willing to take a risk, because, hey, what's the worst that can happen? You fail and you get up and you learn and you do something else. So I think that's the key learning that I've had over my career.
All right. So to your point, Jerry, how many times do we hear like, hey, if a man has 40% check on a promotional list, yes, I'm qualified. And for women, we have to hit like 100% plus whatever else is not on the list. So saying yes is huge. Lovely. What about you? What's a key learning you've had over the years?
I like Jerry, there are just so many, but I would say it's really, I do always say I have the heart of an idealist and the mind of a businesswoman. And I really do think that mix of like, what is your passion? What are you crazy about? What do you love to do? Mixing that sort of, circle with, and what are you good at? Like, what do other people say? Yeah, you're really good at it. Like when I was in law school, I loved constitutional law. Like I loved it, civil rights, the whole thing. It did not come as easily to me as contracts. Like contracts, boom, boom, boom. I've got a much more linear brain than some of the real gymnastics you have to do when you're thinking about disparate impact versus disparate treatment, right? You know what I'm saying, Jerry, right? Like, and so thinking about what you're good at in addition to what people see you as good at and what you're passionate about, and then really going for whatever you want. Because I have gone for a lot of different areas, it meant me having that business mind of, I want to go from here to there, and for these reasons. And one of the things that I would do is every 10 years, I would take a year sabbatical. And I wanted to integrate into my being what changes I was making and really take that time to say, am I being the kind of person that I want to be? And what do I want to do next? Like, what kind of being? Because it's very easy to get on a track and then to look up and be like, how did I get here? And I wanted to be very intentional. And again, I don't come from money. Like that's not something like I'm not a trust fund baby that I could do that. So, but I still have privilege, but I also really, really managed my life so that I knew if I'm going to have a year off without income, this is, I'm planning that all along. And then I'd look at 5 different parts of my life. For me, this is what worked. I looked at my spiritual side. How am I evolving? Is that something that is where I want it to be? I looked at my professional career. Am I being where I want to be? Am I doing what I want to do? I'd make a list of all of the things I love to do, how important they were to me, and whether the environment that I was in was allowing me to be that person, or where I wanted to go next could afford me the opportunity to do what was really important to me, right? Then I also looked at my friends. Am I giving my friends what they really deserve? Making sure that I go on those Maui trips, and friends, that whole personal relationship, my partners, whomever I was with, really looked at that. Then I looked at my family. My family is very, very important to me, both my partner and, and my actual sisters, my parents and everything, and my cousins, everybody. So that was another part. Let's see. spiritual, personal. Oh, and my health and financial were the other two that I really focused on. Am I taking care of my physical body? Am I strong? Am I, getting all those checkups that I needed to get? So looking at each of those segments, I think is really important. So you're not just moving where your job or where life takes you, but you're giving a little intentionality to where you want to go. I think that's really valuable.
I gotta grow up like to be lovely. Okay, so at the end of the day, for planning for a year off every 10 years, what a concept. I love it. And then the fact that when you were talking about the different segments, I was like, no, I need to work on that. I need to work on this. So there's so many. My first tendency is to go, I'm not good at that, and I'm not good at that. And I'm like, what? Stop thinking like that. But yeah, it has to be from a perspective of what else, right? What am I willing to do to get the life I want and love? So I love that. Great tips. Donna, what about you? What are some key learnings for your life, for your career?
Well, I think part of it was the Center for Asian Pacific Women's Poly program, right? Taught me more about myself through Strength Finder and knowing what my top 5 were, and then looking at what my next top 5, and then what really wasn't me, and being able to share that with family, friends, coworkers, peers, to say, are these top 5 really me? And how do you see that play out? So I needed that confirmation that was true. And sure enough, it stuck with me, right? So we talked about learner and connections. So those are in my top 5, but also in my top 5 were, getting things done, right? Arranging, and to be a go-getter, right? So that
I can confirm that too, by the way.
So human effectiveness training was really important to me, really important for me to bring it to my staff, whether it was on ethics, whether it was on team building or strategy or SWOT analysis. We did a lot of it. And I have to say, there were some people who hated it. It was like, we've had enough training. We just need to get work done. Right. And so for some people, they never got that this was for them. It wasn't so much for me or for the company. It was for them, because human effectiveness you can use at work, at home, in family, and community. Right. How do you be a better person? So I was always hoping that they would catch on. And I had one employee once who said, I don't want to learn anymore. I've learned everything. I'm fine. And I said, the minute you stop learning is when I don't need you anymore, right? That was a hard thing for me to say, but I had to make a real point because she wasn't getting it, why it was so important to keep learning and growing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that growth mindset is so important for, especially now if you think about the COVID environment and where we need to go with this whole workforce of the future. That's huge. So to your point, Donna, we have to learn. So I'm going to get a little tactical here because we have a question. And so this is, all 3 of you are master negotiators. Audience, I'm going to tell you that right now. These 3 incredible women are master negotiators. So the question is, what are your tips for successfully negotiating compensation, whether it's for a raise or salaries, or I'm going to say a contract or whatever it is that you're negotiating? So what are the key things? So I'm going to go to Jerry first.
All right. It's like, now I should remember the session we did earlier this year on negotiating. But so I'll say that one of the key tips is to figure out what it is that you want, right? Before you start your ask. You can do a lot of research if you're negotiating salaries, or you're thinking about a new job. You can do a lot of research so that you come prepared to understand what are the considerations. Not only research the topic, but research the people with whom you're interacting, right? So that you can build good rapport. If you know that if you're looking at opportunity with the particular that they focused on growth areas, research in advance, and knowing a little bit about the people with whom you're going to interact will really be helpful to make those asks. And then I would say, be very specific. Know that no is not the end. It may just be the start of the negotiation. So you want to continue to, go back to try to find some common ground when you're seeking something that you want. But I think sometimes we set ourselves up for failure when we don't kind of aim high in terms of our asks and know that, it's just the beginning of a conversation as you're going through those negotiations. I think tactically, it's better to negotiate in person or by video than it is to do things through emails and back and forth. So if you have the opportunity to meet somebody face to face, to engage in the conversation about what it is you're trying to obtain, I think that is more important than anything. And then just be clear. So those are a few tips at the top of my head.
Be specific and know what you want, and aim high and understand your audience, who you're talking to. So some of the key things that I heard. How about you, Lovely? What would you say?
Yeah, I think those are really great ones. I would add to that list, and Jerry sort of intimated in this area of doing research, right? Like if you are looking for salaries, then just see what is the range that you can ask for, check around with people. You can even, if you're looking in a particular industry and you don't know that particular industry, you can, call up somebody who's the president of affinity group in that area, but get your information and get it from many different sources. I think another one is to be reasonable and figure out what are you going to be reasonable about, because everybody should win. And, what are the ones that you do not want to compromise on, right? So figure out what's the most important, and then what are the areas that you're willing to compromise on, and just have that with you. I think the third one is just role play. And I don't think that we do that enough. Have somebody on the other side who's like, hey, and I do this for my girlfriends all the time. In fact, I will not let any of my friends who are looking at a job, either a promotion or I'm always like, when are we going to role play, girl? And they do not like it, but I'm like, we're going to do it. I am ruthless about that, because I do not want any of us to leave money, vacation, opportunity, whatever we want on the table. And I think that's really important, to role play and take the time and do it with a couple of different people, so you have a couple other styles. And then I will also provide a few little tactical pieces. One is, when you're negotiating, always try to get the other person to say what they want first, right? Like, let's say you are doing salary, and they're going to say, all right, well, what are you looking for? And then you just say, well, first of all, I would try to beat them to it when they say, you've got the job. Fantastic. I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear about your package. Right. And then, so you're putting it on them, and they're going to, well, what are you interested in? Well, then you just say, well, I'm looking at a number of factors. Why don't you tell me what the range is here that we're working with? Right. So you put it back on them, and think about, how are you always putting that ball back in their court? If they're really pressing you on it, then go for that high level. And if they're saying something like, oh, we don't know, like, see what the reaction is. If the reaction is, oh my God, no, we can't do that, then you got to really go the other way. If they're like, well, that's like, I don't know, that seems high, then that there's a little bit of a play. And they're like, well, let me think about it. Then like, okay, there's even more. And then they're like, let me get back to you. You've got it. So, these are just like, think about that reaction. Think about where it is. The other tip I'm going to give you, and I can't wait to hear what Donna would say, because you've got like, so you negotiate probably every day with all of your employees. But, what I think is really important is silence. So if something happens that you don't like, or if they're offering you something, right, Jerry? This is a legal tactic too, and all that we do. Just be silent. Like, don't feel the urge to fill that void with, well, unless you think I should get paid less. Like, just sit there. Yes, I said $300,000. Like, just wait. Let it work. So, all right, but Donna, I bet you're the expert at this. So I can't wait to hear what you say.
No, I think, for me, it's more contracts. In terms of salaries, we've had the ranges and, maybe a manager come back and say it didn't work, right? It wasn't good enough. What else do we want to do? But usually mine is all about contracts and negotiating those. So it really is a matter of knowing the market and your competitors and what your strengths and weaknesses are. But what value are you bringing to the client? And you always have to put that forward. And it's a constant reminder to them, right? Whether it's how long you've been in business, your on-time deliveries, you have no quality issues, or you're taking on new services that are going to help them reduce costs. So, and then sometimes you do have to just take a stand and say, no, this is not going to work, because, we have those times now, right? When somebody says, you need to give me a 15% cost reduction. And if you don't have it, you don't have it, in your margin. You just have to say, well, I'm sad, but we're at a point where we're not going to be able to do business again in the future. So maybe you'll go back and think about it, and I'll go back and think about it. But usually we have of late, because of supply chain issues, because of transportation costs, we've been able to maintain those price increases and still stay whole. Yeah.
So here's what I heard from Donna. You be willing to know when to walk away, right? Because you're not going to have the tiger by the tail always. So I think that's a key. And then what I heard from Lovely too was the practicing. How do you sound? I mean, I always tell people, like, interview in front of a mirror and people are like, cringe. But I do think you have to practice. You have to hear the words and how things are phrased. What does your facial expression look like? So all these things matter, the nonverbal cues. But I love the role play because that's what a lot of the sales organizations, they role play.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big aha. So let me ask you this. I can't believe I need another like half an hour at least. But what I want to know is, what's the best advice that your sponsor or a mentor ever gave you that helped you in your career? I'm going to start with whoever wants to start, whoever has that. This is off script now a little bit, but
I'll take it.
Okay.
So the best advice I ever got was, why not? Go do it. Right? So, yeah.
Love that. That's like the reverse of say yes.
Yeah, right. And it's worked. And that I tell other people that too.
Love that. What else?
I'll go. I would say I'm envisioning this conversation I had with someone who I see as a mentor and a friend now over coffee many years ago, which was she was sharing some insights of what people were saying about me in rooms that I wasn't in, right? and that's important, to be able to understand what's happening there. And it was really about just finding my voice, right? Don't be afraid to speak up, even if it's even though if I have a seat at the table, I'm a lawyer, it doesn't mean I can't comment on strategy. It doesn't mean I can't comment on marketing or a financial issue. So know that, we have insights and we have judgment, and we should find our voices and use them in the rooms that we're in, because we're at that table for a reason.
That is great piece of advice, because that's part of, I feel like sometimes we get pigeonholed because we're in a certain area, but you got capacity beyond that, and to share your thoughts, that's very important. What about you, Lovely? You're on mute.
Oh, I thought I unmuted that. Okay. But, one piece of advice that I got that I really love is, one no is worth 1,000 maybes. And what was really interesting about that is before that, I had always thought, if I get a maybe, I can probably get them to yes. But actually, we waste so much time in the maybe space, or we interpret what is a no as a maybe that could go to yes. And it really made me think very differently and very critically, that when someone was saying anything other than a no, that they might still be saying a no, but I just need to listen better. And it just made me focus more on where I should put my energies and prioritize it. Yeah.
Oh, that's that's tweetable, I think. All right, we are coming to the end of our podcast, believe it or not. So what I'm going to do is a lightning round. If I am really wanting to develop myself, what is one practical thing I can do today to get started? Because, I get a lot of, I don't have time to develop, and I get all kinds of reasons why. So what would be the one piece of advice? Anyone want to jump in?
Can I do two pieces?
Yes. Overachiever, Jerry. Overachiever.
So I loved what Lovely said at the beginning about intentionality, because I think that's absolutely on point. That when you want to develop yourself, be intentional. Like, figure out what it is that you want to do, and then set forth a goal around that. And the second piece, though, is accountability. Find your squad to hold you accountable. That's because there's going to be times when you're going to say, nope, can't do this, don't have time for this, fear's going to set in, what have you. You want to have your sisters, your brothers, whoever it is around you to help you stay accountable for the goals that you set for yourself.
Love it. All right, Lovely. What about you?
Jerry, I was literally going to say set up a kitchen cabinet, and you took it. That's the squad. So, okay, this is why I should go first. It's always so interesting what everybody else has to say. But I love that we're simpatico in that. That's great. I next to that, I would say that it's really, really important to live your passion, right? Like, you can do whatever. I really do believe this. There's always a way to do what you want to do. You might not. I'm going to give a short little anecdote. I was out one night with some friends, and it was midnight, and this was a loud place, and there was this guy singing on the guitar. He was awful. And he was loud, and I just thought, why is this place like hiring this awful guy? And it was so loud. At like 10 minutes later, I just finally leaned over to look at who is this idiot playing. And he had the most beautiful glow on his face. His eyes were closed, and he was in the zone. And it was such a poignant moment, and it was a really beautiful lesson for me that, you know what, he was in his bliss, and he didn't care if people applauded him. He was doing what he loved, and he was doing it at midnight in a loud place that a lot of people like me probably didn't appreciate. But you can always find venues, whether it's in your full-time job, in your volunteer work, sitting at home in front of the fireplace, but just find a way to let who you are in your heart and soul come out.
Love it. Yeah. Donna, take us home.
Well, I'm reading a new book, and it's called Love as a Business Strategy. And it's these 4 guys for this company called Culture Plus, and they're going around to corporations, and they're bringing humanity back into the workplace using resilience and trust and belonging and forgiveness, and teaching people how to give constructive criticism and how to receive it well within an organization. And I'm thinking, we've been working on ethical, caring, and compassionate leaders to put at decision tables for a long time. And this is a bestseller. And I think people should read it, because there's so many times, right, that we're in a situation that we watched another boss, and so we start acting out like somebody else instead of who we are or being authentic. We think that's the culture of the organization, right? And this is what we should do. And so, being authentic, I think you can't go wrong with being authentic, and using that discover your strengths now to know who you are and how to lead purposefully in your passion is what everybody should do. Yeah.
Well, everyone, you heard it from the experts. And my takeaway is I am going to continue to amplify these amazing leaders. And guess what? They're going to spread their wealth of knowledge to so many of you that we're all going to uplift one another. So that's the goal. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. Lovely, Jerry, Donna, thank you so much for being here tonight and spending time with us. It was such a pleasure, and there are so many nuggets we dropped.
Yes.
So with that, thank
Yes, exactly. And like Sue-Ann, it's like me and Moana have echoed. If anytime y'all see y'all need extra 30 minutes, we will grant y'all the extra 30 minutes to keep this conversation going, because y'all so many times, Miss Donna, Jerry, Lovely, y'all were dropping the mics on so many of those questions. It was it was amazing. It's like this needs to be like sent to every corporation and have that part of their learning and development. Yes, Leslie says all nuggets, exactly. So once again, we'd like to thank each of you for taking the time out your busy schedule. Just looking at your bio, and I know it's condensed, busy schedule, to come and give these amazing nuggets and information to everyone that is watching right now. Before we get ready to end, can everyone know how they can connect or connect to you, either social media, email, whatever you want to provide? Miss Lovely, let's let you start.
So my name is Lovely Dillon. If you just put in L Dillon, or you go for Joe Devi, if you Google either of those, L Dillon is I'm on Twitter. I'm on. I don't really use Facebook that much anymore. I'm fairly active in the other places. I don't do TikToks, although I'm on TikTok and I really enjoy TikTok. Keeps me up with the youngins, so that's fun. But I mean,
I would say
Joe
LinkedIn.
Devi, yeah, and LinkedIn, of course, yeah.
Yes,
that's the primary, probably. Yeah.
And Jerry, you next.
You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can hit me up in a instant message or the direct messaging, and I'll get back to you. And look forward to connecting with you. Thank you for having me today. I've really had fun.
And
Yeah.
Miss Donna.
Ditto. LinkedIn and Facebook, I'm on both, and I'll reply. Thank you.
Once again, everyone, take all these nuggets, write it down. If you missed anything, of course, the recordings are on YouTube, Facebook, that you can watch the replays there, including Twitter. You can watch the replays on there on our links that we did provide. So definitely go back to those links, rewatch it, take your notes, share with your friends or family, especially if you know someone else that can really take a lot of these tips. Moana, any last words you want to provide before we close out?
Just thank you so much for being a part of our community. And we look forward to connecting with you all and maybe even having you guys back for more wonderful conversations.
Mm-hmm. And Miss Sue-Ann, any last words from you?
Well, you know what? I'm just thrilled that we're partnering and collaborating. We need to continue these conversations that are going to help so many. So I'm thrilled to be collaborating with you.
Yes, definitely. And of course, as they gave their LinkedIn, if you find any of this valuable, please reach out to them, book them at your company to be a guest speaker, a guest panel, because the more we can share with other places and fill those voids, the more we can make the changes that we need in these companies, in the community, and much more. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We look forward to having you on next Thursday. We have, for 7:00 p.m., we're going to have our therapist come on for her for Rain Talk. She is going to talk about burnout. Everybody's experiences. Sometimes you may not know you have had burnout, but tune in, find out the psychological connections to burnout, the physical things to burnout, and how you can look out for it and prevent it. So she's going to be our 7:00 next Thursday. And at 8:30, we're going to have the founder of Cost Gala join us. She's going to talk about how she started it and her ambassadors that are part of it, and let you know what to expect this year at this year's Cost Gala. So once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and everyone have a great evening. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Bye.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, was a freedom then, when they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off, called themselves the Republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand,
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. The work of all the locals. School never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if you put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. The work of all the locals. School never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.